Okay, let's just cut right to the core of this September 2025 government funding standoff. Because what we're looking at now, it's just fundamentally different from, any previous shutdown we've tracked.
It really is.
Historically, these things meant temporary furloughs, right? A sort of forced unpaid leave. But then that 2019 law came in, guaranteed federal employees would get back pay once the funding was sorted.
Which was a crucial safety net, financially speaking.
Exactly. But this time the White House has apparently prepared federal agencies not for those temporary furloughs, but for mass firings, permanent ones, using something called a reduction in force, or RIF directive.
And that right there is the single most critical detail. It's a game changer. When you pivot from a temporary furlough to a permanent RIF, the whole calculation changes. Complete. Well, it means the shutdown isn't just a temporary political disruption anymore, something to force a negotiation. It actually becomes a potential tool for, well, permanent bureaucratic transformation. And crucially, for ideological restructuring of the federal civil service. It's an unprecedented escalation in terms of executive leverage.
Welcome to Nation Scope Podcast. We are diving into the latest headlines, breaking stories, and critical events shaping America and the world. From politics to culture, from the economy to technology, we analyze the news that matters most. And before this deep dive is done, we promise we're going to unpack exactly what these pocket rescissions are all about. We'll look at how a couple of kind of obscure legal opinions from the 80s actually made these massive modern shutdowns even possible.
Yeah, the civiletti opinions, they're key.
And we'll get into why the potential economic damage here is measured in billions of permanently lost GDP. So our mission for you, the listener, today is to really understand that this September 2025 crisis, it's actually less about the healthcare policy fight you see on the surface.
That's the public debate, yes.
Right. It's much more about a really profound constitutional conflict. Congress's fundamental power of the purse versus, well, the executive branch trying to assert unilateral control over spending.
To really grasp the gravity of that constitutional clash, we have to start at the beginning. The bedrock rules, the power to spend, or importantly, not to spend public money. It's reserved entirely for Congress, the legislative branch.
That's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, right? The Appropriations Clause.
Exactly. It's crystal clear. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. Full stop.
And the founders, they knew this was huge. James Madison, he didn't pull any punches, did he? He called this power the most complete and effectual weapon Congress had. Basically their main tool to keep the executive in check, control policy.
Precisely. And the law that's supposed to enforce this constitutional command is the Anti-Deficiency Act. It actually dates way back to 1884, though it's been updated.
Okay, so what does it do exactly? It's pretty simple but incredibly strict. It basically prohibits government agencies from spending money, or even promising to spend money, unless Congress has formally appropriated those funds first. You can't write checks the government can't cash.
Okay, but hang on. If that law has been around for, over a century, why did these funding gaps only start causing these massive headline-grabbing shutdowns relatively recently? Historically, didn't agencies just kind of slow down non-essential stuff and wait it out?
That's the crucial question. And everything changed in 1980 and 1981. This is the hinge point, legally speaking. The Attorney General at the time, Benjamin Civiletti, issued a pair of legal opinions.
Civiletti. Okay.
Yes. And these opinions radically reinterpreted the Anti-Deficiency Act. Before Civiletti, agencies did have some leeway, some discretion to kind of wind down operations gradually.
Right. But Civiletti interpreted the law much more strictly. He basically argued that unless an activity was essential to protect human life or property, think air traffic control, maybe some law enforcement, all other functions, had to just stop immediately, the moment the funding lapsed.
Wow. So that interpretation stripped away agency discretion?
Completely.
Yeah.
And that created the modern, all or nothing shutdown mechanism that we've unfortunately become so familiar with.
So the drama we see almost every fall now, it stems directly from Congress, just failing to do its basic job of funding the government on time, which used to be standard procedure.
Absolutely. The normal process, it's complex, sure. The president sends a budget, Congress is supposed to pass a budget resolution laying out the framework, and then this is the big list pass 12 separate appropriations bills by the deadline, September 30th.
12 bills. Every year.
Every year. And what's really astonishing, maybe depressing, is that Congress hasn't managed to pass all 12 bills on time since. Wait for it. 1997.
1997.
Seriously. So instead, what happens? They rely on these temporary extensions. continuing resolutions, or CRs, which basically just kick the can down the road for a few weeks or months. It's normalized crisis.
And the current threat is even worse, a full shutdown.
That's the situation now. The threat is a full shutdown because literally zero of the 12 appropriations bills needed for fiscal year 2026 have been enacted as we head towards the deadline. Zero.
Okay, so let's unpack the two-front war happening here. We can start with the policy battle, the thing everyone's actually talking about publicly, healthcare. Democrats are using their leverage, the Senate filibuster, basically.
Right. The 60-vote threshold in the Senate is key.
And they've got two big policy demands they want attached to any funding bill. What are they?
Okay. The first core demand centers on the Affordable Care Act, the ACA. They want to extend the enhanced premium tax credits. These subsidies help people afford insurance on the ACA marketplaces, and they're set to expire soon.
And if they expire?
Well, insurance costs would likely spike pretty dramatically for millions of Americans who depend on them. So that's demand number one.
Okay. And the second big one?
The second is about Medicaid. They want to reverse about $840 billion in Medicaid cuts that were actually enacted earlier this year.
Wow, $840 billion. What did those cuts involve?
A big part was implementing new work requirements for Medicaid recipients. And the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, they projected that those changes would cause nearly 8 million people, mostly vulnerable individuals, to lose their health insurance coverage.
8 million people. Okay, so those are pretty significant demands. ACA credits and reversing Medicaid cuts. That's the Democrats' position.
That seems to be the legislative hill they've chosen to defend, yes.
So how does that contrast with the Republican position, which is backed by the White House? Sounds like they want something simpler.
Much simpler, publicly at least. They're pushing for what they call a clean continuing resolution. Just a straightforward extension of current government funding levels, probably through November 21st, 2025, without any major policy changes attached.
And the Democratic demands?
They're labeling them non-starters, basically saying, look, these controversial policy riders don't belong on a must-pass bill to simply keep the government open.
All right, so that's the policy fight. ACA, Medicaid versus a clean CR. But you said earlier this masks a deeper issue.
Exactly. That's the surface debate, the symptom. The deeper conflict, the institutional disease here, is this total breakdown of trust over raw executive power. And that battle really centers on this concept of impoundment.
Impoundment. Okay, define that for us. What does that mean in practice?
Impoundment is basically when the White House, the executive branch, simply refuses to spend money that Congress has already legally appropriated for specific programs.
Even though Congress passed the law saying spend this money on X.
Precisely. Billions of dollars, potentially. For things Congress explicitly funded, maybe Head Start, maybe public health programs, infrastructure projects, the executive just sits on the money, effectively vetoing Congress's spending decision after the fact.
And the White House has been doing this.
There are significant concerns and reports that this has been happening, yes, fueling the distrust.
Okay, and then there's this other tactic you mentioned, pocket rescissions. That sounds sneaky. How do those work, and why are they so damaging to the process?
They are incredibly damaging because they're designed specifically to cut spending without needing Congress's approval, to completely bypass them. Here's how it works. Normally, if the White House wants to cancel funding Congress already approved, they propose a rescission. Congress then has 45 days to review and vote on it.
Okay, standard procedure.
But with a pocket rescission, the timing is the weapon. The White House deliberately submits that cancellation proposal very late in the fiscal year, like in August or September.
Ah, so the 45-day clock runs out.
Exactly. The 45-day congressional review period literally runs past the funding's expiration date, which is September 30th. The money just expires before Congress ever gets a chance to vote yes or no on the cancellation.
So the cut happens automatically. By default, Congress is shut out.
Precisely. And get this. The Government Accountability Office, the GAO, Congress's own nonpartisan watchdog, has already looked at this practice and flat out called it illegal. They say it violates the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act. It undermines Congress's constitutional authority.
Okay, so let me connect the dots here. If I'm a Democratic leader trying to negotiate a funding bill, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Even if we agree to a clean CR without our policy priorities, what's to stop the administration from just turning around and using these impoundment tactics, these illegal pocket rescissions, to unilaterally defund the very programs we care about anyway?
That is exactly the calculation. That's the heart of the institutional breakdown. The legislative branch, particularly the Democrats in this scenario, fear they're being rendered completely irrelevant on spending decisions.
So their big policy demands on ACA and Medicaid. It's not just about the policies themselves.
Not entirely. It's also about leverage. It might be their last real leverage point to try and defend their constitutional role, their power of the purse, against an executive branch that seems willing, even eager, to bypass them on fundamental spending issues. That lack of trust is profound.
This completely reframes the situation, doesn't it? It's not just a typical political standoff where both sides want a deal but disagree on terms. It sounds more like a strategic conflict. You said the administration sees the shutdown not as a failure, but as a strategic opportunity.
That asymmetric view is what makes this 2025 scenario potentially so different. And yes, that framing shutdown as opportunity is strongly associated with the Office of Management and Budget Director, Russ Vought. He's seen as a key architect of this approach, and it aligns with broader efforts, including those linked to Project 2025, which has a stated goal of radically reshaping the federal government.
Okay, so if it's an opportunity, what's the specific goal? How do they plan to exploit a shutdown?
The reported goal is to use the closure itself as a tool, almost like a wrecking ball. Vaught's stated objective, according to sources, is to use the lack of funding to unilaterally defund or, quote, suffocate programs that Democrats would never vote to cut.
Suffocate programs?
Right. It's about advancing a long-term agenda, dramatically shrinking the size, scope, and workforce of the federal bureaucracy by targeting specific agencies and programs for elimination or deep cuts, using the shutdown as the mechanism.
Wow. Okay, so how are the players on Capitol Hill lining up? The Republican leadership, Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, where do they stand?
They appear aligned with the White House strategy, at least publicly. Their main goal seems to be getting that clean CR passed through the House and putting pressure on the Senate. This frames the Democrats as the, quote, sole obstructionists who are holding up government funding because of these added policy demands. It's a blame game strategy.
And the Democrats, Schumer in the Senate, Jeffries in the House.
They seem unified, for now. Their power really resides entirely in that 60-vote requirement in the Senate. That's their choke point to block any CR that doesn't include their health care demands. Their public posture, calling repeatedly for negotiations, is likely designed less to actually achieve a compromise, which seems unlikely given the White House stance, and more to shift the political blame back onto the Republican majority for, quote, refusing to even talk about the substance.
And this refusal to genuinely negotiate, this strategic, maybe cynical approach from the administration, that's what led to the final negotiating session on September 29th just collapsing.
It seems so. Reports indicate that session confirmed the impasse was essentially irreconcilable. Neither side saw a path forward that met their core objectives.
Which brings us back to the most, frankly, alarming part of this whole thing, the thing we opened with. This shift from furlough to reduction in force, RIF. Remind us of the basic difference again.
Right. A furlough, think of it like a temporary, forced, unpaid vacation for government workers. It's disruptive, yes, but that 2019 law means they eventually get their back pay when they return. There's an expectation of coming back.
Okay. But a reduction in force, a RIF.
Our RIF is totally different. It is not a temporary measure. A RIF is a formal legal process for permanent layoffs. It's used when an agency eliminates positions permanently, usually citing lack of funds, lack of work, or a reorganization. The explicit purpose is to terminate employment permanently.
And the administration has actually issued a memo telling agencies to prepare RIF plans.
Yes, and this is the really concerning part. According to reports on the OMB memo, the directive wasn't for some hypothetical, across-the-board RIF planning just in case. It specifically told agencies to prepare RIF plans targeting programs deemed not consistent with the president's priorities.
Not consistent with priorities, so it's targeted.
It appears targeted. This transforms the shutdown from just a blunt instrument related to a funding dispute into a potential surgical tool, a weapon to eliminate specific parts of the government the administration dislikes. The RIF preparation fundamentally alters the purpose of allowing a shutdown to happen.
What are the potential goals behind wielding this RIF threat? It sounds like it serves maybe two purposes.
I think that's right. First, it's obviously extreme coercive leverage against the Democrats in the funding fight. You're not just talking about policy disagreements. You're threatening the actual livelihoods and careers of potentially hundreds of thousands of public servants. The political heat, the human cost, it's immense. It forces Democrats into an awful calculation, weigh policy goals against mass unemployment in their states and districts.
That's the leverage part. What's the second purpose? It sounds bigger, more ideological.
It does. The second purpose appears to be using the RIF mechanism as a vehicle for a kind of ideological purge or restructuring of the government itself. This seems directly linked to efforts like the proposed Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
DOGE.
Right. The goal seems radical.
Yeah.
Use the lapse in appropriations as the legal justification needed to permanently cull entire programs or layers of the bureaucracy, dramatically accelerating that agenda of shrinking the federal workforce by potentially tens, even hundreds of thousands of employees.
How real is this threat, though? We're hearing some conflicting things, reports that maybe some senior officials are privately saying the RAF memo is just political theater designed to scare people.
Well, whether they would actually pull the trigger on mass RIFs is one question. But the threat itself is already having a tangible, damaging impact. That's undeniable.
How so?
We're seeing reports of widespread fear, anxiety, and deep confusion among the 2.1 million civilian federal employees. Morale is reportedly plummeting. And crucially, we know that over 100,000 experienced federal workers have already accepted deferred resignation offers this year.
100,000, why?
Many cite what they describe as a climate of fear, instability, and ideological targeting. So, whether the mass RIFs actually materialize or not, the federal government is already bleeding experienced personnel, losing institutional knowledge because people are choosing to leave rather than work under this constant threat and uncertainty. The damage is already happening.
And this anxiety, this potential disruption, it obviously doesn't just hit federal workers. It ripples out through the whole economy, the whole country, even essential personnel, like, say, active duty military, that they have to keep working, right? But they might not get paid on time.
That's correct. Delayed paychecks for military families is a common and deeply unpopular consequence of shutdowns, and the broader economic damage is massive. And it's important to remember it's entirely self-inflicted.
Do we have numbers on that? What does a shutdown actually cost?
You do. If you look back at the last major shutdown, the one in 2018-2019, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, estimated it reduced the country's GDP by $11 billion.
$1 billion.
And critically, about $3 billion of that was permanently lost economic activity, gone forever, money that never comes back into the economy.
Why permanent? Why doesn't the economy just sort of catch up afterwards?
Because so much economic activity depends on smooth government functioning. Think about it. During a shutdown, payments can be halted on billions in government contracts, hitting small businesses hard. Nearly $184 billion in small business contracts were affected last time. The Small Business Administration, the SBA, freezes loan approvals.
So a small business needing a loan to expand just can't get it.
Right, and maybe they don't just delay the expansion. Maybe the business fails. That opportunity is lost. Plus, think about the sheer waste. Taxpayer money down the drain. The government wasted almost $4 billion total across the last 3 shutdowns just managing the closures and reopening. That includes things like $2.5 billion just in back pay for federal workers who were forced to be idle during the 2013 shutdown, paying people for zero productivity.
And beyond the pure economics, the disruption to actual government services hits people directly, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Immediately and profoundly. You have veterans facing delays in processing their benefits or disability claims. Public safety can be compromised. The FDA has to curtail routine food safety inspections. The EPA halts inspections of hazardous waste sites.
Critical functions just stop.
And for millions of the most vulnerable families, a prolonged shutdown poses a direct threat to crucial safety net programs. Things like SNAP food stamps and WIC funding for mothers and children. These programs need continuous funding and administration, and that can quickly dry up.
Even things we might not think about, like the financial system.
Yes. For instance, the IRS often has to suspend its income and tax verification services during a shutdown. Banks and lenders rely on those services constantly to verify income when approving mortgages and other loans.
So if the bank can't get that IRS verification,
your mortgage approval can just stop dead in its tracks. This creates huge backlogs, delays real estate closings, and slows down that whole sector of the economy. It ripples outwards.
When you lay it all out like that, the economic waste, the service disruptions, the fear among the workforce, it's staggering. But you seem to think the biggest damage is something less tangible.
I do. Ultimately, I think the most profound long-term consequence of this specific crisis, defined by this RIF threat and the rejection of negotiation, is the erosion of basic institutional trust. We've shifted from hardline bargaining, which is normal in politics, to one side seemingly embracing the failure to bargain as a strategic goal. The rejection of compromise itself, that's fundamentally different.
So looking at the whole picture then, the potential use of illegal pocket rescissions, the targeting of federal workers with permanent RIFs, this seeming rejection of negotiation as a principle, It feels like the very idea of a government shutdown has been twisted. It's gone from being an unintended, unfortunate byproduct of legislative failure.
Fletcher betting a deliberate coercive instrument, an instrument wielded to advance specific, deep ideological goals and, perhaps most disturbingly, to actively challenge the constitutional authority, the power of the purse, belonging to a co-equal branch of government.
It raises a really fundamental question.
It does. And maybe this is the thought to leave with you, the listener. If the power of the purse, which remember the founders believed was Congress's single most effectual weapon, their ultimate check, if that power is now being actively sought, even welcomed, by the executive branch, not as a constraint, but as a strategic opportunity for transformation, what does this current crisis truly imply about the actual balance of power that remains in the American system of governance today?
You've been listening to Nation Scope podcast, where Jordan and Jamie analyze the stories shaping America and the world. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.